Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast, where aspiring entrepreneurs learn what it takes to find, buy, and build successful franchise businesses. My name is Drew Carpenito, and I'm your host as we dive into these fascinating behind-the-scenes stories of people who have used surprising franchises to create massive success. I'm glad you're here. Let's dig in. Welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast. I am honored to have this man on. He's a busy dude. He's got a lot of wisdom to drop. Kurt Graves, welcome to the Franchise Masters podcast.
I'm glad to be here. Let's everybody applaud.
Well, you dressed up for this thing. You look great. I didn't get dressed up for you, and that's what a podcast is for, right?
You don't sleep like this? I think you sleep. I sleep like this.
For anybody that can't see Kurt, he looks dashing.
Yes,
but
thank you.
We're not here to talk about your clothes. Kurt has one of the most interesting businesses out there, I think, and I've worked with Kurt personally through his business. Kurt is a Vistage Chair who works with entrepreneurs, business owners, executives, key leaders of all different types of businesses in the Charlotte, North Carolina market, and has a unique vantage point as it goes into, anybody who's thinking about building their own business, anybody who's in business right now and is trying to get to the next level. Kurt coaches people through all different stages and phases of business growth. So, Kurt, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And thank you for persisting to get me here when I missed appointments and all those other things I did along the way.
Well,
I'm really glad to be here.
That was my fault.
I'm a fan, so I'm really happy to be here.
I was Kurt and I worked together. I was one of his clients in one of his Vistage groups, and you had an impact on me. Vistage had an impact on me, and just the way that you went about it, and the whole organization, genuinely had an impact in my life. So I appreciate you for that. But
thank you.
We're kind of jumping ahead and talking about this Vistage thing and business coaching. You want to give the folks a quick intro about Vistage quickly, and maybe a little bit about your journey and how you got to find yourself in the seat that you're in?
Yeah, I can do that pretty darn quick. So Vistage is one of several peer advisory board kind of groups. I think we're the oldest. Vistage is 65 plus years old. Started when several business owners 65 years ago up in the upper Midwest got together to start talking on a monthly basis about their businesses. They'd come together and in a roundtable would work issues and opportunities they had. They began to bring in a speaker to some of those meetings, and they realized along the way, hey, this is really helping us to grow our business. And they filled up a group and then another group and another group. And then Robert Norris, one of our founders, said, hey, I think this is powerful, and I think that this is what I want to do. And so he started a company called Tech then. That's our predecessor name. And it just grew from there. And so today we have 44,000 members globally.
Amazing.
Around the country, around the globe, and 600 plus people in the U.S. that do what I do, which is I'm a chair, which means I'm the group facilitator and coach. So members, typically the CEO members, business owner members, they monthly have a coaching session with me, and then they come together in a group, and I facilitate a speaker in the morning, and we work their issues and opportunities in the afternoon. And that's a permanent, ongoing process, month after month.
Yeah.
So that's the basics. Yeah.
It's like a safe place for executives and business owners to come together to compare notes and talk about things that probably very few people can relate to. Yeah.
To get their answers questioned, to get people, probably this will come out. I don't know if there's a person I really like. And he says, nobody's ever spotted their own self-deception. Michael Brody Waite said that. He said, nobody's ever spotted their own self-deception. So in a way, a Vistage group is a way for CEOs and business owners to come together and get challenged about what they think they see and what they're believing in, and maybe see it differently. It's powerful. This is great fun.
Yeah, it is. And there's a whole methodology that we can maybe get into a little bit around, not too much sharing the secret sauce, but it is a very structured environment, and
for sure.
Chairs like Kurt facilitate it, organize it, herd the cats, of coming together. But there's a lot of intention and thought that goes behind a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. It's a great, for anybody who's listening in the Charlotte market, number one, reach out to Kurt, talk about it. Wherever you may be in the country, there's probably a Vistage chapter locally. Worth a conversation for sure.
You're in the United States, there is a spot, and sometimes many folks close to you just don't know it. So for sure. Yeah. And my journey was, I was raised in a family, actually, golly, I was raised in a family of business owners, and so I had the great fortune of having a grandfather. This is my grandfather Bonnie's handsaw. He was when he moved from Oklahoma to California. Actually, before the Great Depression, his first job was in a sawmill, and after that, he realized he was going to get killed if he stayed in the sawmill. So he became a painter, and he had a painting contracting business. And my father, after him, my grandfather on my other side of the family, my father's side of the family, was a talent stone mason, and my father followed in his steps, worked for him, took the family business. So my father was a tile contractor, and so I had the real blessing growing up as a kid, 10 years old. Real fond memory of mine is being 10 years old, and in reality, my mother's probably just trying to get me out of her hair on Saturday afternoons in the summer. But she would take me out to the job where I was going to work, and I would take my lunchbox, and I would take my dad's lunchbox, and I would sit with him, and we'd eat lunch together. I'd have an identical lunch to his. I drank tea, he drank coffee, but it was identical otherwise. And I just got to be with him and absorb from him by being on jobs, and a lot of the things that I think are really important, and the way I think I've found success, and some of the ways I probably found failure too, or I can chalk up to my father. And so I absorbed a lot by growing up in a family where there were entrepreneurs, and that served me really well too. So hats off to Bonnie Jeffries and Bill Graves.
It was in your blood, huh?
It is. And I think that's a lot of times we find people, right, that want to be entrepreneurs or want to get out from doing whatever they're doing, and are looking at a franchise, and they came from families, or they came from places where like they want to stretch their wings, and maybe they feel like they're not getting an opportunity to do that where they're at, and they can go back to what they learned a long time ago.
Is that how you got into the tile business as an executive?
It really was. Yes.
Huh,
My father was tile setter. I worked for him. Worked a semester between high school and college. I was not really quite sure what I wanted to do. And then I think I would have been really happy going back and working for him, but he didn't want that. And then I passed away. He passed away. I didn't pass away. He passed away my senior year in college. And my first stint after that was in public accounting, which taught me a lot. And also I learned that I really didn't want to be a public accountant, CPA. And I was living in Tulsa at the time, and went to work there was a ceramic tile manufacturer in Tulsa, of all places. And I went to work as one of their first controllers. And so that's how I got back into the tile business, and worked for a variety of international companies that had manufacturing or distribution in the US, and went through all kinds of roles, from finance, operations, and ultimately as a CEO of an organization here in the US. So yeah, that's how I spent most of my career in corporate world in tile, which is kind of cool.
It's a very humble story about a very successful career pre-Vistage. So how did you find your way into Vistage after a good run of the corporate side of things?
I had a lot. I have to be real clear. I learned a lot from mistakes, and my first business, jumping off and coming to Charlotte from Tulsa, was a huge failure, and more or less bankrupted us. Pretty painful. But you've heard the saying, everything will be fine in the end. If it's not fine yet, it's not the end. And we persevered, and we got through. And then I stayed in the tile industry and found my way again, and found my way better. So I want to be clear that life is not a straight line up and to the left. It's got some jagged tears to the bottom and below too. And that's where I've really learned.
Would it be any fun if it was a straight line, Kurt?
It would, no, it would not.
Yeah, I
like a game. I like some excitement, yeah, for sure. But it would be better if it did involve a number less than 0 too. Just saying.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But that's where you really learn, right?
That's where you really learn. That's right. That's where you really learn. Yeah. So my last gig, I was a U.S. president, or business unit president, for a company called Orchid Ceramics. We were the marketing and logistics arm for a company out of Bogota, Colombia, called Organización Corona. They still are. And we designed products here, and manufactured products in our companies and our facilities in Colombia, and then we imported them and sold them to distributors all over the U.S. And that was actually a startup. So I have several experiences in startups. I've done 3.
Wow.
I like to start things, and I like to run them once I have them going. So yeah, a little bit of both.
That's nice.
Yeah. So that was my last gig. And then after 2008, 11, 12, somewhere in there, about 11 years ago, decided it was time to take a break from that and try to find something else. I was heading in my mid 50s, and thought, I've been getting on planes and traveling 50+% of the time, and it's been fun. But the industry, we were importing out of Colombia, and there were some difficulties with the currency and being able to secure a clear vision for the future for that company. My services were no longer needed, and so I said, okay, I think I'm going to move on. And I took a year sabbatical and just took time off and cleared my head and traveled around different places I'd wanted to go and got really fit. And then in the middle of that, kind of went back and said, you know what, the things that are really important to me is I love an adventure. I love to start things. I love to invest in people. I want to do something back in leader, something that has to do, I want to make my living developing leaders and helping people to grow. And I learned about Vistage at that time. I had not been a Vistage member. I wish I had been. That would have been very helpful. But I heard about Vistage and I just said, I think I can do this. And I convinced them to let me try. And so here I am 11 years later, still doing it. It's been a terrific fit. So it kind of came back around in a lot of ways for me.
No doubt.
Back getting to use some of what I knew, but being a coach is a lot about asking good questions and not being too smart and asking a lot of things. And so, so that's hard for a CEO, ex-CEO. I wanted to tell people what to do. And I found that early on, I learned, I remember somewhere about the second or third year, I was in a meeting and some member was working an issue with the group and they were coming to a conclusion and they made a commitment. As the group expected them to make a commitment, what they do in the next 30 days. And they made the commitment. I thought back in my mind, that is a terrible idea. And he went and did it and it worked. And I was like, really, there's more ways to do things than the way I do them. And a certain humility started to grow. And I just started to really believe in the power of the group and seeing that my real gift was in bringing awesome, diverse groups of people together and getting the best out of them and not being a smart guy anymore.
I can imagine it's a hard transition from running the show, being the top dog, being the CEO, and then putting yourself into a room of other people that are running businesses at, probably a smaller level than maybe you were, but they're still.
No, I mean, some were, some are not. I mean, I have members I work with that run companies that have $1 billion in revenue and some that have $1 million. They're just all humans. They're all the same, but they're all strong-willed and they all are ambitious, and it can be pretty tough to keep up with them, but it's the best job in the world if you like to be really.
How did you was there anything that you did to make that transition? Because I work with a lot of folks that obviously like get into something new, right? And whenever you get into something new, there is a transition, there's learning. It's not going to be a linear change. Even just kind of like, just that little thing of like being comfortable asking questions is pretty significant part of what you do really, really well. Like what was that transition like for you, going from being the top dog to facilitating top dogs?
It was super difficult. And I think that applies probably with some of the folks that you work with. One thing that's just worth saying is you're used to getting a salary, even if you're a CEO, you're getting a bonus, you're getting a salary. Your life is, you don't have real world problems. You really have platinum problems. And then suddenly you say, oh, I'm not going to go back to that. I'm going to start a new business where I'm only going to live off of what I kill, and the runway to get back to where I was might be never, or might be, I don't know. It's turned out great for me, but for a lot of people, you're going to, I just think you can't check that at the door. I think you have to be like, am I really willing? Do I really want this bad enough? And do I have the runway to make it? Because quitting it's just not an alternative. Like I'm a big believer in calling. And when I was asked by one of the trainers, Bob Dabbick, who's an amazing person, Kurt, we got to the very end of the training. He said, you want to do this or not? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what makes you think you're going to succeed? And I was like, I think I'm called. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure that's good enough. I was like, I think it'll be just fine. But it was really hard, just having enough runway. Very practical, but it's very different to live for a year and just take a sabbatical. So I'd already been living off what I'd saved, and then say, oh, I'll just take another year and I'll just live off of what I've saved again, because you have to turn your capital back into your business for some period of time. And then, you get to start spending money that you're making. Much easier to live spending money you're making than spending money you've saved or invested. That's tough. That was one of the hardest things for me. I don't know. Do you see that?
Yeah. I mean, I walked away from the paycheck, a healthy one, with a young family, as a sole income provider for my kids when they were 3 years old. And I don't think you write that one up as a potential wise decision. And yeah, man, like It was different. A lot of conversations with Allie, before we made the jump, and had to have the dry powder in the bank to
Yes.
be able to lean on and find, you got to find gratification from something other than money, because
Yes.
it's the money comes, but it can't be just about money. It's got to be about something else, whether you feel called, or you're trying to achieve something that you just can't get working in what you were doing before. It's definitely the long game, and
Yeah.
you got to find you got to pull energy from the little wins as you start to mount them, kind of brick by brick, and eventually you look back and you're like, whoa, holy moly, okay, I got there. But it's head down, perseverance, and not for everybody, and not easy, but I do believe that there's a little bit of an end of the tunnel, end of the rainbow.
Tons of benefits on the back for those who persist and who really know where they're going. I think another thing for me was, I think everybody suffers to some level with imposter phenomena. I'm not sure I call it a syndrome, because that would imply can't ever be changed. But I think it's a phenomena that we all deal with. And I think that I remember when I began, and I wonder if when people go to the franchise schools, if they experience the same. I walked into training in San Diego for my first set of training, and I looked at the list of people on the paper, and I was on the sheet of paper. And I was like, I made the mistake of looking them all up on LinkedIn and Googled their companies. I thought, these are amazing people. They've made a huge mistake to invite me here. And what were they thinking? And then I walked in and I met them, and I was sure I was the worst person in the room, And then I did then the first person, said that they wanted to work with me, and I was sure they made a mistake. And I realized they'd never had a coach, and they didn't know the difference between a good coaching session and a bad one. And you just do. I think that starting out, one thing for me was learning to be content to know that I did the best with what I had, and not imposter phenomena is about the gap between where I'm at and where I think I should be. It's kind of shame based. So that could be external, or it could be anything I projected. Maybe I've been in training with a guy like Bob Dabbick, and so now that's my standard of what a coach should be like. I'm no Bob Dabbick. So I have to do this in my personality. I have to do it my way. And that just takes a long time to get comfortable with. I'm still not entirely comfortable with that, honestly. And so I think that that's a challenge.
Yeah.
You're a CEO, when you start a business, if you're a franchisee and you start a business, people expect you to know, or you think they expect you to know, and you just don't know. And there's not always a lot of people to go. That is one of the things I love about the idea of franchising. I think you're gonna get to that, but I just love the idea that you're just not creating everything on your own. I chose, and part of the reason why I chose Vistage was the oldest, really focused on business, although we sort of work with the whole, we definitely work with the whole person, because the way the person is the way they do things. But I loved the business focus. I love being a part of the big brand, because it covers a lot of mistakes. They had a strong back office. There was a lot of things they could do to support me, so that I could focus on what I wanted to do, which was have life-changing conversations with. So that was part of my choice. So I worried less, knowing, hey, they have a process. At that time, 54-year-old company. Okay, I'm never going to figure this out the way they already have. I can just dial into this and do it to the truth of my own personality.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, it was terrifying. It was terrifying because when I was starting the number side of the business, but I'd say I was very good in operations and good in culture and marketing too. But we were selling ceramic tile products to big distributors, and a lot of it was about working capital and margins and things like that. So when you go out and if you're going to go out and do a service business, you will be selling essentially yourself. And that felt, and I'm sure in your role, it's you're like, hey, I'm an expert. And now you're like, wow, what if they see through that? So so I took it, and I took it very hard when people would say, I don't get it. I'm not interested. I would be like, how can they not be interested? It's just, it was selling me. And still to this day, when I get a result or something outcome, or maybe a member after many years with me decides time to move on, we decide to get time to move on, I will take it hard for a day or two. Just do. Yeah. So those are the hardest things for me, and jumping out on my own and starting my business. But Can I talk about the benefits?
Yeah, well, I do want to, before we get into the benefits, like, but you earn the right to get in the room with the other people that you were in the room with, right? And however you saw yourself compared to the other people, but like those are the rooms you want to be in, isn't it? Like, put yourself in those rooms. It's kind of the spirit of Vistage in a way too. It's like,
Yeah.
get in the room with people that have some semblance of success, and maybe it's not the
Yeah.
exact success you want to have, but
Yeah.
they've been through something that you have already gone through. And just to have the ability to pick up the phone and call somebody and be like, hey, have you ever run into this before? Like, can you help me through this, or can we just talk through this a little bit? And if they don't know the answer, they can point you to somebody who has. And like, it
Yes.
is like the power of just getting in those rooms that can be intimidating to get into. Like, it's hard to even describe
Yeah,
how
you'll
it can.
see people, even people that have big companies will come into the Vistage room. And I know they're terrific leaders because by that time I've probably spent a couple hours with them, talking with them and coaching them and preparing them, working out together. We're not a group might be a fit for them. And then they come in the room and you'll see them you see the intimidation or the wobble. And you're like, wow, like it's like saying everybody wants to be in that room, but even when they're there, there's some posturing or maybe
Yeah.
it's, and so you gotta get them, hey, like, here's an idea, get naked in here and tell us what's really going on. Because if you don't, we're going to tell you what we think is really going on.
Yeah. And you can sniff it. Like, if somebody's holding back, like, it's
Yeah.
and that's part of the power of like the process with the
Yes.
question answering and not
Yeah.
telling. And we'll probably get into that a little bit, but I
Well,
do
and it's,
find Vistage like so unique because you're a successful CEO of like a successful international company. Dave Zierfoss,
oh, for
CEO
sure.
of whatever, he would, some big ass company.
Husqvarna.
Sorry. Oh yes. A Husqvarna. You may have heard of it.
Dave took Husqvarna from just a small peddler of being terrible. They weren't a small peddler, but they were a direct to dealer uh, company of just tools, right? And David took them into Lowe's and took them out, totally changed the channel, all the channel management, and took them into a multi-billion-dollar business. His team.
And
He
but
would not say,
it's like, okay, Dave, Kurt, you've had a ton of success in your career. Here's the training. Go get some clients.
yeah,
Good luck. Right? What do you mean?
yeah,
How do you
right,
get clients? Well, you gotta pick up the phone. You got to start prospecting. Like,
yeah,
the doors aren't just going to open for you. I mean, I'm sure I got to think that was a little bit of a transition to just
yeah,
kind of like earn your way into the doors that maybe
yeah,
previously had been opened a little bit easier for you at your level of
yeah.
success and whatnot.
You're
It's a
you're selling
fascinating model.
you're selling peer boards, which is and coaching, which is something that nobody ever knows they need, and they don't even know what it is. But you're earnest, and and sometimes they're morbidly curious at the start. No, you get doors open because people want to help you, and somebody will say, hey, you need to talk to Drew. And somebody say, I'm listening because Drew said I need, Kurt told me I need to talk to you, Drew. And then they get in front of you, and they show up as, I believe, if you show up and your interest, I don't even have it, but I think if you show up like you're really interested to talk and to listen to them about their business, really listen. I think Walker Percy said they will be amazed. And when you do that, then you earn the right to start asking questions that provide them with value. And if you start providing value, then they might want to hang out with you. They might think there's something to it. So you have to give that. I mean, I don't know. What's the Napoleon Hill quote? Like, you want to be, the way to succeed is to help the other guy to succeed. The way to succeed fast is to help someone else to succeed. And so we want to show up as coaches as providing a lot of value and not keeping score early, because that's what will attract people and keep them coming back.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
the
helpful.
essence.
Yeah.
And it's
It really,
fun when you do it, when you make the magic happen and really help somebody by asking questions, right? And not even giving them the answer. You just you help facilitate a way for people to find clarity and answers that they're just having a hard time seeing themselves. It's really
yes.
interesting.
And me too, it's interesting that in a Vistage room, in a group setting, which is really where the magic is, it can happen anywhere. But what is amazing, that maybe somebody's bringing an issue, or maybe somebody's listening to the host members. Each member hosts, a different member hosts every month. Maybe the member is sharing their story or their journey of how they started their company and got to where they are. And it's sitting in the room and listening and hearing your own struggle or your own opportunities in the words of somebody else that is creates, let's say, the shock that gets you to go, oh yeah. And it can feel in the moment where somebody who couldn't see something before with a problem that they're having suddenly sees it different and now knows what to do. It feels sacred. It feels like something has really shifted in the room, and then they come back and we get to celebrate success together. So you're with a lot of really successful people, and for the most part, everybody goes north. They certainly
Yeah.
go north better together than they do alone, and that's really fun.
That was
Makes it,
like one of the biggest things that I learned making the transition from corporate to self-employed.
yeah.
It's lonely. Like, it's
You're
just you. Like,
you're locked.
there's no more water cooler talk. And if you're talking to the water cooler, self-employed, starting a business, you're wasting time. It's lonely, and it's a definitely a different type of work. But so I think, like with Vistage, right? Like, it creates that almost like therapeutic experience of just being with people that are going through, live the same life that you do in a way,
Yeah.
just different business and that kind of thing, and can relate on a level that maybe you have a hard time talking to folks that aren't in the same shoes that you're in, to be able to talk about, something bad that happened with an employee, or, whatever, right? Even family stuff, right? Like, just, a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we kind of keep stuff maybe inside a little bit more than we should. And because there's just a hard
Sure.
to share some of the stuff, but the creating that, like, the magic of an environment within a Vistage session is, again, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's very powerful. What is the, like,
Yeah.
what is it, like, the issue processing, right? Like, the rules were, you can only ask
Yeah.
questions. You can't offer suggestions, right? So can
Well,
you
you got
explain
to
that a little bit?
yeah, ask questions when you're supposed to be asking questions, and give recommendations when you're supposed to be giving recommendations. So I think that this is my opinion. This isn't a Vistage opinion. I would just start by saying that I think that we live in a time where critical thinking is weak to almost non-existent. And so one of the people don't learn it in their homes growing up. They're not learning it in schools. They're not learning on soccer fields. They're not learning it on social media. And so one of the things that we have to develop is the complexity of mind to be critical thinkers. And to be a good critical thinker, you have to listen a lot and ask really good questions. And so Vistage has a process for critical thinking. I just think we call it the Vistage issue process. It's not very fancy, but it starts. I wish I'd put it up over there, but it starts. If you think of it like an hourglass, at the very top, a member comes in and says, "How do I what?" So let's say an issue is going to be something like, "How do I? How do I?" I'm going to try to give one that's pretty. I've heard recently. Recently here, so I think I'm at the limit of how much I can pay my people. And I know that I'm losing people with some regularity to competitors that are in other industries. How do I keep my people? How do I keep my people? And they might talk for a few minutes about the background, what's costing, a specific example. And then, as you were saying, start to move down the funnel, and we start to ask questions. And so we kind of root around. We may start with some questions on the top, like, what's it costing you if this doesn't change? What's going to happen, right? We ask them kind of why do you think this? But then we go deep and we start to ask the fellow member, well, what are your beliefs about this? What are your fears? What are your opinions and assumptions? Mary Orr, who's a Vistage speaker for years, says take inventory of your beliefs, opinions, and assumptions, because they're seeds of your intent. So we can kind of get it. Ask the person disruptive questions, in David Zervos's words, that create disruptive dilemmas that sort of shock the person into seeing that they may not be seeing the situation entirely. Maybe they would find out that along the way that they can't compete. They're right, but they could be better with it's just money. But they could be better at some other things, or they could say they could have a better culture, or they could take on the attitude like in this group of roles in our company, we're going to be perfectly happy hiring people out of college, training them for 3 years, and letting them go. Maybe the old idea that people join me and they have to stay with me forever is no longer true. Whatever it is, they work to it. They get to this after they've been asked a lot of questions. 30 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe, just depends. So I think I'm facilitating, I'm seeing, I think the group has got enough material. Then we come to the middle of the funnel. We say, hey, let's restate what the how do I is now. And many times it would change from how do I keep my people from being stolen to maybe it's going to be something like, how do I get okay with being the guy who trains or the gal that trains people right out of college and doesn't get their feelings hurt when people are ready to move on. Like I'm gonna like, or how do I change the lives of employees that never want to leave? Whatever it may change to something exponential, should change to something exponential and powerful. How do I create a workplace that changes lives? So when people decide they want to leave, it's okay because there's more lives that we can change. And then the group will step in. Funnel starts to go out, and it starts to go back out this way, and the group just gives their suggestions. So I think you should put in place a regular teaching time. People get to sit down with you once a month and hear from you as the CEO, and you create a culture of learning and growth. They give specific recommendations, then we get to the bottom, and the member will say, from all the recommendations they have, what is it that you want to do? And they make several commitments. We write them down, and they go away, and they come back next month and they tell us how it went. If that's done continually over time, they'll make a lot of progress. But the group holds them accountable. Actually, that's nonsense. They will want to be accountable because nobody wants to come back to a group of their peer CEOs and tell them that they didn't do their homework. They're like, accountability is a gift that we give to people. It's not something that we make people do. That's a whole discussion on its own. And that process done over, members take that thinking, and then they, instead of going to their offices, and all the people that come to your office all day long and say, hey, can I get a minute? Can I get a minute? Instead of doing that, they start using their time to teach people how to think critically, and so that they can work on growing the business instead of working in the business where they have people to do that. So that process, you see it changing. I see it. People come in, they improve their critical thinking, and then that they show up as a different person in the workplace. They're training people to be critical thinkers, and the whole thing gains lift because the thinking is better. So if they think better, they'll make better decisions. They'll get better results. So we could change the people, could change the leaders. So that's why that process. It's objective. It can be emotional, and it should be emotional too, but it's objective.
And in a way, it's kind of like it's simple, but
Very.
The elegance of executing it the proper way of really helping to facilitate the member to drill down into what the real problem is, stated in the right way, which is a lot harder than it sounds like to do. It's not as easy. Even just phrasing the real issue is hard to sometimes find the words, but by having the questions and having somebody like Kurt to kind of maybe throw out some ideas, like it can really just shift how you think about that problem in a different way.
Yeah, and those imagine a room with 12 other folks, 12, 14, 15 other folks. The diversity, there's no competitors in the room. There's nobody from your industry in there. They're all from different industries, which is very interesting too. And you gain the perspectives of people, different genders, different ages, grew up at different places around the world. They do not see the world the same way. And so you get kind of a big, not a mess, you get challenged by the diversity that exists in humans, especially in thinking, and that provokes breakthrough solutions that I just wouldn't get to by myself. That's what happens. Do it enough. Yeah.
Can you share any like powerful moments within a session, maybe without naming names, that that you could give us a little example of where you felt like you played a large or small role in helping the leader, business owner of a company kind of eventually like just go on to have the success that they wanted to have?
Yeah, I'd probably cover a couple. One I see, especially with smaller companies. Saw this one time with actually it was not a small company, but it was a situation when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting out. A lot of times people necessarily employ friends and family, and some of those end up working out, and some of those don't. And had a member who was not. I didn't realize for whatever reason, I didn't realize that an area of their company where there was bad results showing up was in the control or being managed by a family member, someone in the family. And as I began to realize that in the coaching session, I was like, the cost of that, let's do the calculation. We did the calculation. It was a lot of money. And it was causing a lot of fear because the person was frustrated because you can't You can't fire a family member, right? That was the story. But they weren't getting the results that were necessary, were needed. And so there was a real conflict. But who wants to be the person who lets go of their brother, and then you don't get invited back to Thanksgiving, or your sister-in-law doesn't talk to you anymore.
I can
That's
imagine. It's tough.
very emotional, right? So that was just, that sort of situation is just a no-go. So the power of the group that was available was, hey, maybe the question is, how do I do what's right for the business, and I honor my family member too? Like, how do I honor the family? How do I honor my parents? That's complex. But with the help of the group, a plan got worked out and the person was able to execute it. And I would think I know it was a difficult 1 year around, but they crafted a really good solution. And I think it worked out better both for the person who was lower performing, because it's terrible to be stuck in a job where you're low performing. Nobody
Right.
wants, I don't believe anybody gets up in the morning and says, I think I'll just go out and be low performing today. And so and the business thrived. And so that would be an example of I would think a very emotional and very strategic issue that I saw group work.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
there's all kinds of them. Some of them would be just as simple, like recently took a couple members at the same time and said, how are you seeing the challenges next year? They both share, but two very different businesses. And then the group kind of plumbed down the sides. One of them, just one of the issues was, how do we continue to work with Gen Zers, like new generations? How do we embrace that better and stop being whiny baby boomers or Gen Xers, because we are whiny, and stop talking about how the kids aren't all right, because our parents thought the same thing about us, and like really embrace those generational changes, change our mindset. And by changing that mindset, there was a lot of diversity of opinions. And what I took away from it was, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my results. That's it. If it's not working the way I want it to work, if it's not working yet, then it's on me to keep working with it. But people are people, and our kids are terrific, so other kids must be terrific too. So stop whining and get out there and create a great workplace and get work done.
So you see all kinds of stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
not. I'll ask you this: like, have you noticed any, like, for the entrepreneurs that you work with, like, are there common themes of issues that they tend to bring
Hmm.
to the group for help or struggle with, or is it really just across every aspect of an organization, a business, a company?
If they're smaller businesses, I'd say they're really trying to work to get the place where they can get that. I don't work with companies that are trying to prove concepts or are not yet profitable. If they're not yet profitable, it's pretty tough to generate enough value to for me to charge them for that. So that is one of the qualifications. But if they're smaller and getting started, they're really trying to figure out, I think, a lot of, how do I build a team? How do I build this team around so I can work on the business, not in the business? You alluded to it earlier. How do I create a workforce that can work, so I'm not like, people are always knocking on the door and saying, can you help me for a minute? How do I keep work? What is work life integration? Because I'm pretty sure there's no work life balance. I think one of the hardest roles in the world is to be a single mother entrepreneur. And I work a number of those over the years. And so for them, it's like, how do I do all this and start and run my business too? Oh my
Right.
gosh, that's a
Right.
tough, because they've got so many things going on. I think that as they go, when they're smaller too, they're trying to figure out how to implement processes. I'll put a plug in here for EOS traction. I think that they're trying to still get a process in for a general system for how they run their business. Then as they get somewhere north of where they finally got a good team, the question really, I think, becomes, how do they really juice it and really get a lot more out of it? So now they've got a set of processes, they've got data, they've got good people in most of the spots. It's going to be like, how do we really grow this? How do we scale it? That's not possible until that point. And it's a lot around, how do I get a great number two? And how do we take it north from there? Capital is always a challenge.
Yeah.
How do we pay for stuff? I constantly challenge not all members, but I constantly challenge many members on their gross margin. People are not courageous enough on pricing and gross margin. And it is hard to make money if you don't have strong pricing courage.
Right.
So it tends to sometimes come later. As they get further along, I think it really becomes, more strategic. Where are we going to grow? What are the vectors? Who are the competitors? All that, right? What routes to market can we add? Those sorts of things. At the end of it, we're always working on the person in front of us. It's really about, this gentleman gave me some questions to think about. And one of the questions I really liked was why most people you work with are successful. So why do they want to have a coach? And what I hear all the time from really successful people, when I show up in their office and I say, Drew, what do you want to talk about today? A lot of my members say, Kurt, I just want to get a little better today. Just a little better. And they are really hungry to get a little better. And if I say something like, well, where do you want to get a little better? It'd be like, everywhere. Like, they're ambitious. And so that never changes. And so helping them to know how to develop they can get better by making their people better. There's just so many ways to go with that. So I don't know if that's what we were looking for exactly, but.
Well, I think it speaks to like the mindset, right? Of like kind of getting there with a lot of people individually, with the hustle bustle stress of, getting a business from one stage of growth to the next stage.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's kind of never ending, right? At the end of the day, in a way, but if you can be intentional about it and, obviously like have some people helping you to maybe recognize where you are in your growth. But, I think, you mentioned it, like there's this ambition that a lot of entrepreneurs have that you can't turn off, right? Like it just doesn't go away. It's the blessing and the curse of whatever. But if you can figure out how to channel it
for sure
at different places, at different, areas of the business, as it makes sense, as the business continues to grow, and having that self-awareness or being, humility at the end of the day, right? Just to, not think you have all the answers and think, what's the right next move, and listen to what other people may have to offer. Like, it's not easy getting to that mindset, I don't think. Anyways,
they're all hungry. They're all hungry for sure.
Yeah. You're a big proponent of EOS too. I heard you mention that. You think of all the operating systems out there. That's
everybody has to have, I think everybody has to have an operating system. I would recommend that you have the best operating system that makes sense for your business. I think that's one of the big benefits of franchises. And then everybody, I think, get as much coaching and mentoring as you can afford. That could be creating your own mastermind. It could be joining a group like Vistage. It could be hiring your own individual coach, but definitely it could be certainly joining your industry groups where you can share your financials and see other financial statements. Get really good at your financials. Know your numbers. And surround yourself with other people who want to grow. You're never going to be better than the people you're around.
Get in the room.
And those get in the room.
Yeah. Get in the room. Easier said than done, but Vistage is a room that, for a lot of folks, a lot of franchisees, like a lot of multi-unit franchisees, I know they're scaling. And, the franchise companies, sometimes they don't have the playbook to scale from 3 locations to 10 locations. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And then that's when you gotta get in the room. You got to call other multi-unit operators. You got to, whatever it may be. But like for somebody that is, looking to scale, like Vistage is a very real thing that can benefit. You've had franchisees, right? I mean, I know you had a multi-unit operator of a certain brand. I won't mention the brand, but you work with franchisees, right?
Absolutely. Franchisors and franchisees, both. Yeah. Absolutely. And, and so that I think that you've got to get, what we do is different. I don't provide show you how to run your marketing or show you how to set your store up or any of that. What we do is to help the leader to continue be stretched and grow, so that as they then grow, they'll grow the business. It's really about growing the person in front of us, helping them make a better person, so they'll make better decisions, get better results. And that's our bailiwick for sure. But there's other people who do all the other things, and then maybe they're fringe. I know plenty of people are in franchises that run on EOS because they don't have that EOS is a very unique system for bringing together, the team, the data, the processes, the people, the issues, the vision, and creating traction. You got to get it. You have to decide when you're starting, keep it simple, but as you go along, you got to still keep it simple, but figure out what you need as you go and go get those resources. That's the only thing you can do.
Kurt, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for joining and dropping the
Oh,
knowledge.
yeah. Okay.
If people
Thank
want
you.
to, if you're in the Charlotte area, you need to listen to this, because Kurt's about to drop his how to get in touch with him. If you want, hopefully some people reaching out from this podcast, if you're in Charlotte, North Carolina, but how can folks get in touch with you, Kurt?
If they are from between Hickory and Columbia, because I'm greedy, they can call me. You can call me or you can email me. You could call me or text me at 704-724-0420. You can email me at Kurt, KURT.graves, GRAVES, at Vistage, it's a made up word, VISTAGE, chair, CHAIR.com. It's long. Or you just Google Kurt Graves Vistage, and I will pop up. All my data will be there.
And we'll drop it in the show notes for folks so you have it as well.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Kurt,
always
a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah. Keep doing good.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap. Hope you found a nugget or two in there that can help you on your franchise journey. And if you ever want to talk franchising, reach out to me anytime.